right, everyone, welcome back to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We're going to be joined now by one of our educational finance experts, Michelle Clifton. Hi, Michelle. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Ian, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And usually I have a little bit more of a preamble in the introduction before I actually say hello to the guest. But because I'm so out of my depth here on this particular topic, I had to introduce you before I could even start talking about it. So we're talking today about the SAVE plan and what's going on with it. SAVE is in all caps, SAVE, which suggests to me that it stands for something. But why don't you enlighten me and enlighten our guests on what's happening right now with the SAVE plan?
Yeah, you're good. Yep. So SAVE stands for Saving on a Valuable Education.
Okay.
It was the most recently created income-driven repayment plan for federal student loan borrowers. So it was basically a modified version of the old repay plan
Okay.
because Fed loves those type of names. So this plan did make payments a lot more manageable for borrowers, so it was very exciting.
Yeah.
And actually 8 million borrowers enrolled in this plan, and even about, I think it was more than half of them were eligible for zero due payments because of the way that this plan was calculated. So there's been a lot of drama. So a couple state-led lawsuits are in play. They argue that there was an overreach of authority when implementing this plan last fall.
Okay.
And on July 18th, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals temporarily blocked the plan completely until a ruling is made. So there was a court hearing last week on October 24th that we're
Okay.
waiting to hear. So obviously we're waiting to hear in the coming weeks on what's next, but this could end up going to the Supreme Court. And if that's the case, we won't have a final ruling till like next summer. So a lot up in the air. Fortunately, borrowers on the SAVE plan already have been placed into an administrative forbearance
Okay.
starting in August, even some cases in July. So they're not required to make payments at this time. And they actually recently announced that first it was until a decision's made, but now they actually went ahead and pushed it up 6 months. So the earliest that anyone on the SAVE plan would have to do anything or take action would be April of 2025 at this point.
Gotcha. So forbearance, is that mandatory or is that optional? Like, could I
That is
keep?
a great question. So it's the servicers are supposed to be putting them into the forbearance. So if your servicer hasn't, you can tell them to, but you do not have to stay in forbearance. You could
Gotcha.
choose another plan.
Gotcha. And that would allow me, if I feel like I can keep repaying my loan, then that's a maybe a better route for me as opposed to waiting until April
Yes,
to find resolution.
absolutely.
Gotcha. Now, does this forbearance period count at all towards the loan forgiveness that might be a part of this plan?
Yeah, there's been a lot of confusion about this because when we had that administrative forbearance or payment pause, as they called it, during the 3.5 years during the pandemic, that did count towards forgiveness, which was
Hmm.
great. But this particular forbearance, they're saying it does not count. So it doesn't count towards the 10 years for public service loan forgiveness or the 20 or 25 years for income-driven repayment forgiveness. So it's really, it's helpful because it's not accruing interest, but it's not getting anyone any progress towards the ultimate forgiveness.
And might that be a reason why I would not want to be in forbearance and continue making my payment because
Yes.
it moves me towards that forgiveness?
Yeah, it's tricky though, because the only plan that's open right now at this point is IBR, which calculates a lot higher, especially for old borrowers prior to 2014. It calculates at 15% of discretionary income versus 10. So it's hard to know, like, what if the SAVE plan does make it through this, and
Hmm.
then people have switched to a higher plan, and then they paid more than they should have, but they would have made progress. So there is one nice thing for public service loan forgiveness is that there's a buyback program
Uh-huh.
where once they've gotten to 120 months of qualifying time in working for their employer, they can go back and buy back time in forgiveness at that time. So they can't do anything now if they're not at the 10 years, but in the future they can. So that's something to keep an eye on if for someone that's not at that 10 years yet, or if they are, they can buy back the time at this point.
Michelle, where does an average person go to figure this out? Like, what? How do they
Don't
know?
even get me
How
started.
do people know this stuff
Yeah, no,
if they don't have
it's
you
wild to
or?
me because I read about it every single day, and like I don't, the average person can't even continue. You can't even try to. It's really frustrating because not only that, but when you call the servicers, a lot of times they give bad information. I was just calling Advantage yesterday to to ask about something, and they gave me bad information. I was like, nope, that's not what the Department of Ed site says. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So,
Ah,
but studentaid.gov is my favorite resource because
okay.
they do write it in a way that you can most of the time understand. Um, so for this particular circumstance, I say what is it? So studentaid.gov/save action is where they've been updating things, although
Okay.
that one's a little bit behind, and the most recent updates are on ed.gov/save. So those two websites are very helpful for this particular
And that's just
scenario.
SAVE, save.
SAVE. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see. We've got all this is the save plan. There's also the income driven repayment plan, the IDR
hmm
plan. Have
hmm
there been any changes or updates about how the IDR program works as a result of this injunction?
Yeah. So as of right now, there's the only active plan that people can go into is IBR, as I said. Anyone they can apply for SAVE even though it's paused, and they'll go into that their interest-free forbearance. So for someone that wants to take advantage of that, they can. Although very recently they updated ed.gov/save to say that they plan to bring back the pay plan and the ICR plan, which were phased out as part of the save plan. So, but of course, they're saying on that website it says that later this fall they plan to bring it back, and it's like later this fall. It's October 30th. I mean, the day we're recording, but um,
We've
I feel like
still
that's
got a
not
month and a
gonna.
half till
Yeah,
technically the
like
fall runs out.
nothing
Yeah.
the Department of Ed does is quick. So, you know, it seems like a lofty goal, but
Well,
we
so
were just, but
yeah,
there will be more options that are available, is what I should say.
but everything that's being done here is not an act of Congress, but is instead a part of the executive branch trying to move things in
Right.
different directions. And so the potential for any decision to be held up by courts, by appeals, it is very high.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that because so that's why the IBR plan or income-based repayment plan, that one was passed by Congress. So,
Mm.
there's been a lot of talk about worst case scenario, that's the only plan left. So that one is available and will be available unless Congress changes, goes through the process to change that. But everything else is pretty up in the air at this point.
Now, there are still my initial understanding of these public service loan forgiveness plans are the standard 10-year, the graduate, the extended plans. Like, are those things that are still in place that people can still take advantage of?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the regular plans like you standard graduated, extended, graduated, those are still they've been unaffected by this. Borrowers can still apply for those plans and they can do that right through their servicing website. So whether they have AidVantage, Ed Financial, Mohila, Nelnet, they can go onto that website and submit a request to change into one of those plans.
Is there ever like a best like a universal best option for people, or is it always it depends? And it's like, I mean,
Yeah.
is there a way to, for listeners who are listening to this, for whom this applies, to say like, here's really what you should be doing right now? Or is it like we really have to look at your situation, we have to understand your income, we have to look at which plans you've applied to, we got to talk to your servicer. Like what's the nature of individualization versus broad advice in this space?
Yeah, so try to drill it down to the most broad I can think of would be three scenarios. Someone who wants to pay off their loan as quick as possible, someone who wants to benefit from the most forgiveness possible, and then, of course, what was my third? Oh, someone who may not be able to get forgiveness, but wants to have the lowest payment possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with lowest payment. So for someone where the income driven payment plans just don't cal your income's too high compared to your debt, that just you're never going to get forgiveness that way. If you wanted the lowest payment possible, you would either use the extended plan if you have at least 30,000 in federal loans to extend it to 25 years. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to pay a lot more in interest over time,
But it
but your
stretches it
your
out.
yep, your payments will be lower. Or if you have over 60,000 and you want a 30-year term, you can consolidate the loans through the federal consolidation process, and that'll give you 30 years. Or if you have less than 30, but you want to extend it beyond the 10, you can consolidate and have somewhere, depending on the balance, it can be like 15 to 20 years, depending on the balance.
So if
And
you
that
want your
would,
payment to be as low as
yep,
possible, you're trying to stretch it.
yep.
you're going for these longer plans. You pay more in interest long term,
Yep.
but at
Yeah.
least your monthly payment is lower.
Exactly. So whenever I'm working with someone on that circumstance, I always compare the interest savings or the
Yeah.
interest cost for compared to like standard, for
So
example.
what if I am hoping to just have my loans forgiven? Does that mean
Yep.
I want to get into forbearance and just wait and cross my fingers, or is there other
No.
action I can take on here?
Yeah. So in that case, you'd want to apply for an income-driven plan and
Okay.
choose the plan that gives you the lowest monthly payment, which, was safe and, may or may not be the case. But and then I love to talk about paying your loans off as quick as possible because I feel like that's a question I get all the time. And surprisingly, people are surprised by the answer because because really you have to make extra payments. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't want to do that, but that's what you have to do. So basically, in that circumstance, I say use the standard 10-year repayment plan because that's going to give you, the highest payment. And then it's over a 10-year term. And then anytime you can make extra payments, whether that's every single month or once a year or whenever you can, make sure that your servicer's applying that to the principal balance so that you're saving yourself interest over time
So you get a
and
bonus.
time.
It's exciting to buy something fun, but maybe Michelle says, call your servicer and put it on your principal instead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Man, what a complicated thing. I can't believe that you keep all this stuff straight in your head. How do you do that?
Yeah, sometimes I get burnt out on it, but I love to be able to make it a little bit more clear because the average person is very confused by it, and I completely understand why.
I think like some people would just be like, this stresses me out and I can't, and I'm going to tune out. And it's too
Yeah.
bad that this is so complicated. And then it's being made even more complex, in a way that,
Yeah.
I think it's hard. It's hard for people.
Even
So
when even with applying extra to principal, the servicers do not make it easy. You most often have to reach out to them like by sending them a message or calling them. Where if you're making an extra payment on the principal of your mortgage, you just indicate that on the payment.
that's right. That's right.
Like it's so easy. So it frustrates me.
It's tough stuff. Michelle, thanks for coming and talking through this. I hope we can lower that blood pressure a little bit as this segment ends.
Absolutely.
But I'm stressed just talking about it. It was great to have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Next week, we will be back with more. As far as talking about finance, we're going to be talking about buy now, pay later. Sounds great. What is it? We're going to talk a little bit about that Black Friday shopping that might be coming up. We'll also be discussing interview strategies. You heard from Lauren Randall that Georgetown requires an interview. We'll talk about what you can do in the interview setting. And we'll also be talking through Drexel, which is a great university in the Philadelphia area, with a Philadelphia resident. So we look forward to having you back. Hope everybody feels good after November 1st, and take care of each other out there in the world.